In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the roster in StationSMARTS. Now we have multiple views into the roster. If you're looking at a desktop computer, then on the main menu, we have a roster view right here. This is currently on duty personnel only, so you can see here at the bottom of my screen, I have the computer showing that it's 10:30 at night, so this is who is currently on duty at this time. If we were to actually look at the roster that's available through StationSMARTS, you'll see there are a lot of people that are actually out of the shift, but they're not showing in this view. So that's an on-duty view only. And then this is a view for the roster if you're actually going to be making changes to the roster. Now the roster is also available on the other devices. So if you log in on your iPhone, then you'll be able to view the roster. It's also available from your iPad. So you can see here's the same view into the roster on the iPad as well. So you can see that view there of who's currently on duty, where they've been assigned, their certifications. The same on the iPhone as well. So if you were on an iPhone here, you could swipe with your finger and you'd be able to see all of those names as well. I'll just expand this a little and you can see all of those names are there along with the credentials. So that's all available to you as well from multiple devices. Now within the roster itself, we can actually do multiple types of rosters. So the roster we're looking at here is an on-duty roster. If I close that roster, we're going to go through the activity tracker. The activity tracker is where the roster is managed. So you could actually create the roster here if it wasn't already created. I'm going to click here to be able to view the other types of rosters that are available. So you can see I've created an on-duty roster here, but we also have administrative, on-duty, overtime, and training. These are just some examples that other departments use for rosters. This department doesn't necessarily use all of these, but these are all examples of what other departments use. So administrative, very self-explanatory. Your admin personnel could use this type of roster. On call, that type of roster tends to be if you're calling back personnel for an emergency response, then you add them only to that roster so you can keep track of how many callbacks you've done. Same for the overtime. Anyone that's scheduled in on overtime, then they get scheduled into that roster. That way you're able to view all of your overtime in one roster view. Same for the training. If they're here doing training of any kind, but they're not on duty, maybe they get paid overtime for that training, so you want to record them on a special training roster. That's all available. So you can do any types of roster here, as many as you need. The system allows you to define multiple types, however many you need. And you can also create the rosters out to any date range. It's automatically going to choose today's date when you click this duty roster button to create a roster. But you could choose any date here, really. I could change this to be tomorrow, Tuesday. I'm going to leave it for today, and I'm just going to go ahead and let's create an on-call, and I'm going to say create roster. Now for the on-duty roster, we're going to be adding every person for today's group to the roster. So we would come in here, we would choose the group, and it'll automatically grab all of the names for that group. I've already created an on-duty roster. For an on-call roster, we also have the option for all types of rosters to also create it empty. So you can see here in the green, it's telling us just to leave the group empty, and when we click continue, it's actually going to create an empty roster for us. So I'm going to do that for the on-call roster just for an example. So you can see it starts out with an empty line that you can start filling in. If you don't want to use this line, that's fine. You can add personnel as you need and then delete the entry when you're ready to do so. Or you can just start using this line to fill in the pieces that you need to fill in. I'm going to go back to the on-duty roster that I have pre-created. Again, to create that, I just chose the group that was working for today, which would have been group 1. And then the system automatically grabs all of the group 1 names from the employee records and it pastes them into the roster here. Now it also grabs their apparatus assignments if those have been assigned in their employee records. So if you have a default assigned, it'll pre-fill here for you. But you can make those changes here as well. So if I see, here for Gray, he's been assigned to E2 and he's the E2 officer. We could actually reassign him if we needed to. We could clear this, clear the assignment, reassign him to somewhere else. So that's still available in the roster. The employee defaults just allows you to set up essentially a starting point. So if they always come in the shift, they're typically always on engine 1. You can set their default to engine 1. It'll come into the roster as engine 1. Now looking at the roster itself, we can see here there are multiple lines for information here. So if we just look straight across, obviously the first name, and then their classification. You can decide what the classification is when you create the roster. A lot of departments want it to say scheduled if they're just working a typical shift that they're supposed to be working. Other departments like to use on duty as the term here. Whatever terminology you want to use, the roster is able to be modified to use that terminology. So in this case, my demo is using scheduled. And then you can see the other classifications change based on when they're coming in. So you can see Byrne came in, he's on overtime. He's covering for somebody else. And Lawless actually did a swap with someone. So she is working today, but she's actually just going to be swapped here. So if we look up the roster and reporting that we look into, then we'll see that she's here on a swap. So she wasn't supposed to be working today. You can see her group is actually group 3, but her classification shows a swap. So she's working today because she swapped with Gray. All right, so then within the other columns here, we have the date, time end, time start, date end, all of those time periods here. They came in automatically as 0800 to 0800 because that's what the definition for the roster is. Now, if you do split shift, you can have a day shift, night shift, and it'll automatically paste in the starting times that you give for your roster. If you're doing like an on-call roster, then I recommend that you do 0800 to 0800 and then just change the time period that you need to change it to, just so that you have the roster pre-set up. But for the on duty, okay, this demo is for a full shift, so we haven't split it into day night. This is full of 24-hour period. So if we add anyone into this roster, they're going to come in automatically as 24 hours. All right, so then the group is self-explanatory. The duty station can be changed here. So if you have multiple stations, this demo only has one station, but if we had multiple, we could reassign personnel to a different duty station. And then our assignments, of course, as we just discussed. Duty excused reason is if they're not working today, we could click the time absent and then choose the reason that they have been excused from the shift. And then if we're going to be replacing someone here, then we have the called in reason. Now the called in reason is actually marked through the roster change. So you can see here both of those squares kind of changes colors when you hover over either one. Clicking anywhere in this space is going to bring up the roster change pop over, and this is a quick way to do a swap. So if someone is going to be out for any reason, it doesn't have to just be a swap, it could be any leave time. So maybe they're out on personal time, vacation time, whatever. We could actually come in here and say they're out and give the reason they're out, mark their time as absent, bring in the person that's replacing them, give the reason that they're coming in, mark the duty classification. So for your department, that could be overtime, maybe it's coverage, whatever terminology you want to use here. Again, all of these popovers can be set up based on your system, whatever terminology you want to use. And then the date start, time start, it'll automatically be set to the roster time, start and end. But we can change this if there's something a little different. Maybe they're coming in for a little less time or whatever. And then we would click the continue. Once we have the green fields filled in, the green continue button will show up. We can click continue and we'll be done. So that's that roster change ability. And then we just have a note field here, which you can see expands if we expand the window. If you have the screen real estate, then you can do that. All right, so then within this view, we have a couple of other items here within the view. So we've got a shift note. You can use this for whatever you need to. You can see in my example, we've just listed out some highlighted items that maybe someone that's just peeking at the roster would like to know. The other items that we could list here, maybe you have an important meeting today for the captains. You maybe want to stick that in there. So you could have captain's meeting here. So that's available as well. And this is going to show on your roster printouts. So you would be able to see that. All right, and then at the top here, we have a couple of options for managing the roster. All right, I'm going to start from the right to the left. The insert note, this is going to insert it into the StationSMARTS whiteboard, which is on the main menu. We kind of saw a quick moment of that here. It's called the Fire Station News in this case, but you can call this whatever you want to call it. But clicking that pencil will just insert it into that view for us. Okay, then the broadcast is a great way to send out all of the roster information to whoever may need it. So maybe you've got this going to be sent out to everybody on the roster. Maybe you need to send this to your dispatcher. This is the button that you would choose. It's going to create an activity tracker entry for us. Now it's automatically choosing those personnel that were on the roster. So if we wanted to make any changes here, we can. I'm just going to go ahead and say Station 1. So it's marked, it's showing everyone for me. So here I could mark, I want to send it to the dispatcher. Maybe I want to send it to the chief. Maybe I want to send it to myself. Whatever we need to have marked there. And then we can click the compose message button. And it's going to pre-create an email. And it's got all of that information from the roster there for us. So it's just a real quick summary of those pieces. And it's only those currently on duty. So this is going to go, the system automatically grabbed the information for dispatch and for those other names that I had marked. And this email is going to send that over to them. All right, so I'm going to close those and go back to our roster here. All right, so within this view, then we can see here, we had that insert, we had the broadcast, then we also have the print button. So here we have two different print options. We can do a writing list, which we call the personnel shift time and assignment roster. So you can click there. And then if we were to choose that little checkbox here, then when we click there, it's actually going to give us all of the rosters for the entire day and include the shift note. So if you have multiple rosters, maybe you're doing a day shift, night shift kind of thing, then you could click that checkbox and it'll put the day shift and the night shift both within this same roster. And you can see that the on-call was also grabbed. So I created an on-call roster. There aren't any entries in it yet, so you can see this is blank. But by clicking that show all the rosters, then that's available in the view as well. All right, so then the all roster information is just a summary of the roster. So it also gives us our shift note, and it's giving us everything. It's not just the on duty like the writing list is. It's everybody, whether they're absent or whether they're working today. And it's going to give you all of the information from the roster. So this is a great summary page. If you just need to have something printed out just as a check and balance or whatever you need for paperwork, then this is a great report for that. This is not a payroll report. It's just a summary of the roster for today. Okay, the last item that I want to point out on the roster before we move on is the officer in charge. We kind of skimmed over that when we went over the columns. It's this little column here. So you can see that there are two people currently marked as the officer in charge for different time periods. So you can see here that Lawless is marked for the beginning of the shift, and then Gray's going to take over at the end of the shift. We could also have one person marked. So I'm going to say here Boudreaux is our officer in charge just for this example. Then you can see here that he's marked and it's for the full shift. And the system's going to use this for your roster management in the emergency responses. Okay, we took a look at the roster through the roster management view. So that was through the activity tracker. Now I also want to show you how you can add on-call personnel to the roster. So I'm going to go through an emergency response. So I'm going to open this. This just happened a little while ago. And we can see here there's some apparatus that responded already. The call's been closed. We can actually do this while the call is open. But if we do that, then we're not going to get the full times. If we add personnel after the call's closed, then the system will actually grab these times. So I'm going to use this button here, the Add Roster Personnel button. And I'm going to choose the on-call roster. We could also add them to the on-duty roster if we wanted to. I'm going to choose the on-call roster. And you can see it opened up that on-call roster, and it opened up a popover for me to be able to choose the names. I'm going to choose Station 1 to view all names. I could also choose the first letter of their last name and sort by that, but I'm going to do Station 1 for all the names. All right, so I'm going to click, let's just say Brooks and King. We did a callback for them. You can see it automatically marked as callback. I'm going to do the call-in reason is going to be emergency response. And then I'm going to click continue. You can see the tracking number and the activity ID number. That's that unique number that is marked for every single activity entry. They both got copied in, so I'm going to click continue. And those names have been added to the roster. Now, as I mentioned with the on-call roster, it created that empty line when we started the roster. Now that I've added some entries, I'm not going to use that empty line, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete that. And then that'll give us a nice clean view. And these are the on-call personnel that have been called in. You can see it says emergency response, and there's that tracking number in the note. It's also available if you click on the name, you get some summary fields here. So you can see here that it's been brought in via a tracking number emergency response. All right, I'm going to close this roster, and I'm going to close the emergency response. We're back in the activity tracker. I want to show you your payroll reporting that's available through StationSMARTS. We're actually going to go to the Filter Actions tab within the activity tracker, and I'm going to choose the filter category Duty Roster. Now you can see when I choose that, I get some extra options over here. I'm going to choose a date period. So let's say this month so far. That should give us a couple of entries. Yep, we've got 25 entries there, so that's going to give us a good view. And now these three options that we have available are the same report. You're going to get the same report no matter what, and that report's going to encompass all of the entries that are available in this view. So if you see it in this view, it's going to be in the report. Now we can come in here and we can see the same report, but it's going to be sorted differently based on the button that we choose. So we can sort by their excused reason. So this is going to place those personnel, their entries where they were actually absent for the shift. Then those entries are going to be placed first. It's going to sort by those. Or we can do by classification. So that was that scheduled for us. It could be on duty. Or we could do it by the called in reason. So for those that got callbacks, any other reason where a called in reason was filled in, those are going to be sorted that way. So that would be the first column. I'm going to do classification just so you can see that. So you can see here as an example, Boudreaux has 2 shifts as scheduled shifts. There were 24 hours each, 48 hours. And then we've got Brooks has a callback for 20, this is a quarter of an hour. Now I want to show you something really cool with our roster. So this right now is showing a quarter of an hour because he came in for that period for an emergency response. So let me just move that out of the way for a moment. I'm going to go back to that on-call roster. So let's go to today, and I'm going to open that duty roster. All right, and that was Brooks. So let's go ahead and see in this line, there's that quarter hour that he worked today for that emergency response. Now, what if your department has a minimum hour that they get paid for? So he came in for a quarter of an hour. But let's say that he actually gets paid 3 hours anytime he gets called in. I'm going to change this to 3. So instead of the system marking this period of time based on the calculation of exactly how much time, I've actually filled in a manual time for 3 hours. Okay, so I'm going to close that roster back. I'll bring this roster view back in. Now this is still showing a quarter of an hour because we need to refresh it. So I'm going to close that, go back to my filter, and I'm going to click the classification again. And you can see here, Brooks, there's his callback. It still shows the apparatus time, the emergency response time for when he actually came in, when he actually left. But notice the hours say 3 hours. So now this is going to give us his minimum pay. So you can keep a record of that within the roster as well. All right, now within this roster report, a couple other items I just want to point out. The sick, vacation, personal time, you get a summary here. It also subtotals here within the view. So you can see scheduled gets a subtotal. So if you want to track another item that's not listed in these parentheses, then that's real easy to do. You just need to choose the report that's going to stick that in the subtotal column. So you can see here we did by classification. So we can see 14 hours of coverage, 48 hours of regular scheduled time. And then we've got, 24 hours scheduled for hacky. So the roster will give you all of that information. Now, if we do an excused reason roster for the report, the payroll report, let's look at gray here. We've got 3 regular shifts here. There's no excused reason recorded because it's regular shifts. That's when he was working. Now, an excused reason here, we have a swap. So he was absent for the swap, and that was 10 hours total. So it's really easy to keep track of those items here within the payroll reporting. And this has been the roster in StationSMARTS.